Chapter 14, Cell Consciousness and the Power of Thought. This brings me on to the topic of the consciousness of cells. I remember reading in a metaphysical book by Dolores Cannon a while ago that every living cell within the human body is conscious of itself until it dies, and because of this the whole body is full of self-consciousness. From a scientific perspective, factors associated with consciousness include observation, measurements, human intention, perception, and our thoughts. Thoughts have been shown, in science, to yield some interesting results when it comes to influencing our own human bodies. Our body's immune systems are controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and it has long been thought that we cannot influence our immune system or the autonomic nervous system, but that has now changed. Intensive care researchers Dr. Matthew Cox and Peter Pickers, professors of experimental intensive care medicine at Radboud University in Nijmegen, conducted a study. Their subject, named Wim Hof, showed that he was able to use meditation to stay submerged in ice for almost 2 hours without his core body temperature changing. This pointed to the remarkable role that consciousness plays in our body's reaction to particular conditions. Wim has since gone on to climb Mount Everest in shorts, resist altitude sickness, complete a marathon in the desert with no water, and prove in a lab setting that he can influence his nervous and immune systems at will. The results obtained are remarkable. However, the investigators emphasize that so far, these results have only been obtained in a single individual. Therefore, they cannot serve as scientific evidence for the hypothesis that the autonomic nervous system and the immune response can be influenced through concentration and meditation techniques. Harvard professor of medicine Herbert Benson and a team of researchers studied monks living in the Himalayas who could raise the temperatures of their fingers and toes by as much as 17 degrees through a yoga technique. They also studied advanced meditators in India and found that the monks there could lower their metabolism by 64%. In 1985, the research team found monks drying cold and wet sheets with body heat alone. A fascinating example of this is the placebo effect, of which I have written about before. Researchers around the world have found that the placebo effect can stimulate real biological and physiological responses, from changes in heart rate to blood pressure and chemical activity in the brain. An article in 2002 by Professor Irving Kirsch from the University of Connecticut and published in the American Association's Prevention and Treatment article found that 80% of the effect of antidepressants from clinical trials could be attributed to the placebo effect. As I mentioned earlier, David Wilcock writes about placebos in his book entitled The Source Field Investigations, and he commented that in 2009, Wired magazine revealed that the placebo effect has become substantially more powerful in a short time. This is causing big trouble for the major pharmaceutical manufacturers, as in order for their drugs to pass clinical trials, they have to work better than placebos. From 2001 to 2006, 20% more products were cut after less demanding Phase 2 clinical trials, and another 11% failed the more extensive Phase 3 trials. Eli Lilly had to abandon a new drug to treat schizophrenia when their volunteers showed a 200% increase in their response to their placebos. Existing drugs like Prozac are now also doing worse and worse when compared to placebos. 2 different comprehensive investigations into antidepressants found that there has been a remarkable increase in our responsiveness to placebos since the 1980s. This is causing serious financial pain to the pharmaceutical industry, which had become more profitable than big oil, thanks to expensive widespread drugs like Prozac. The big pharma companies say that their drugs are not becoming weaker. Instead, the placebo effect is getting stronger, and no one can figure out why. an internationally recognized non-profit research and education organization named HeartMath, which is dedicated to helping people reduce stress, self-regulate emotions and build energy towards healthy and happy lives, investigated the interaction of the brain and the heart. They investigated how the brain and the heart communicate and how it affects our consciousness. They found that when a person is feeling really positive emotionally, feelings such as love, appreciation or gratitude, the heart beats out a certain message. The heart beats out the biggest electromagnetic field, and researchers can gather data from that. Emotional information is actually coded and modulated into these fields. By learning to shift our emotions, we are changing the information coded into the magnetic fields that are radiated by the heart and that can impact those around us, said Roland McCarty, Ph.D., and Director of Research at the Institute. David Wilcock, in his book entitled The Source Field Investigations, also writes about the power of thought and intent. He mentions an experiment that was performed by Cleve Baxter, who worked for the CIA before working as director of the Keeler Polygraph Institute in Chicago. He connected a houseplant to a polygraph to see what happened. He saw that the plant did not have a smooth, flat pattern of electrical activity, but it was surprisingly jagged and alive, changing moment to moment. Polygraph tests are used to tell if somebody is telling the truth or lying. With the plant being connected to the polygraph, he tried dipping one of the leaves into hot coffee with no response. He then tried tapping one of the leaves with a pen with no response. He then had a thought about lighting a match and burning one of the plant's leaves. The very moment the imagery of a burning leaf entered my mind, the polygraph recording pen moved rapidly to the top of the chart. No words were spoken, not touching the plant, no lighting of matches, just my clear intention to burn a leaf. The plant recording showed dramatic excitation. I then thought, gee, it's as though this plant had read my mind. Baxter then felt sympathy for the plant and never again did an experiment that involved burning or threatening to burn plants. After this discovery in 1966, he found that once you start taking care of plants, it tracks your thoughts and feelings. During plant monitoring sessions, when I left the lab to run an errand, I found that the moment I returned, the plant showed a fairly significant reaction, especially when my decision to return was made in a spontaneous manner. Baxter also performed experiments with human cells. He obtained human cells from a person's mouth by having them swish water around the mouth before spitting into a test tube. Using a centrifuge, he extracted the living white blood cells using an eyedropper before putting them into a test tube to be electroded with thin gold wire so they could survive for 10 to 12 hours. He performed this experiment with Dr. Brian O'Leary, a NASA astronaut. He had brought a female along to the lab of Baxter after having an argument. This enabled high-quality chart reactions. The astronaut then left for the airport to fly 300 miles away while Baxter monitored his cells he had left. The astronaut agreed to keep an accurate log of events which might have caused him anxiety. These included missing a turn on the freeway while returning his rental car, nearly missing his flight due to long queues, flight departure and landing, missed pickup and others. Later comparisons were made with the logged events compared to the appropriate portion on the chart, and there was a good correlation between chart reactions and nearly all of the perceived anxieties. His chart became very quiet after he returned home and retired for the evening. Wilcock commented that his own mind was broadcasting waves of information that were being picked up by his living cells in a lab 300 miles away, and the effect works just as well if the cells are kept in shielded rooms, proving that the signals are not transmitted by electromagnetic energy. Helen E. Williams reports on studies that our thoughts create our realities and cites Dr. Masaru Emoto's water experiments. As an experiment, he set out to understand how our thoughts have an impact on our lives, and he spent most of the 1990s performing experiments to see how positive and negative thoughts can alter the properties of water. He filled multiple containers with water, and to each one he directed either positive or negative thoughts, both written and verbal. He wrote either positive or negative words on the containers, spoke to them positively or negatively, or played positive or negative music to the containers. He used statements such as "I love you" or "thank you" and "I hate you" and "get away from me." At the end of the experiments conducted for a specific time, he collected samples of water from each container and froze them. The crystals were then photographed. He found that the sample of water that was treated to positive thoughts and intent formed clear and beautiful ice crystals. Those exposed to negative thoughts and intent showed negative and ugly patterns. He took the experiments a step further by adding indifference. By putting rice into 3 containers and adding water, he subjected each to a different thought pattern. Positive equals positive prayers, negative equals harsh statements, indifference equals ignoring them. After 30 days he compared the 3 and found that the container given positive prayer had created a fermented and sweet aroma. The one exposed to negativity turned black, and the neglected container showed signs of mold and decay. Helen E. Williams commented that given that our bodies are made up mostly of water, imagine how our thoughts and intentions about ourselves and others dramatically alter our own energy fields, auras. Author Graham Hancock points out that his fellow author David Wilcock writes about his original ideas, and one of these is that thoughts are things. They're tangible or measurable. We should be aware that our thoughts can manifest tangible effects in the real world.